Hello, my name's Olorotimi Osha, and I often discuss American presidents, and I end up showing the through line between U.S. history, presidential actions, and their profiles, and the institutions that were designed to protect our liberties. I've also been taking time to discuss color of law violations under 18 USC section um, section 241 and 242 and 42 USC section 1983, and that's malicious prosecution, previous deprivation of rights, uh, following a swatting. That's a false um, false emergency and a hoax call that was called at my home, was engineered by government agents and including police, Montgomery County Police, and I ended up being brutalized in my home, dehumanized, attacked, assaulted, falsely imprisoned, and then to add insult to injury, the police officers who shot me, shot in the head, tasered me multiple times. They claimed, I assaulted them. So the state of Maryland filed charges against me after I'd been removed from my home without an arrest warrant. No warrant was shown to me. It falsely imprisoned me. The day they came like a full force, about 40 cops, Montgomery County police officers that I see on the list, because I couldn't see them. I was falsely imprisoned. When I came out in the corridor, I saw a lot of cops, pointing firearms at me, and they'd gaslighted me severely. My neighbors, of course, I have friends who were my neighbors who even lived on my floor. They told me that, look, it was like a military force that came. They had rifles. They were in the stairwell, and they said there was a criminal holding a woman hostage in my apartment. Of course, that's all fabricated. That's all false. I was alone in my apartment. There was no woman with me, and so that was a hoax call, a false emergency. Who engineered it? The state, of course, has made it seem it was Jide Iwariri that engineered it with his malicious and perjured emergency evaluation petition that I was never given notice of. That's since been recanted and disavowed. The state of Maryland filed charges against Jide Wari, but they suppressed it. And then there was another neighbor who had lied because Jide Wari referred to a police officer who claimed that I had been in a fight and I was threatening my neighbors. Again, so a neighbor called Germa Shumi, he filed a false, perjured peace order while I'd already been removed from my home and I was, falsely imprisoned, wrongfully imprisoned at a hospital because, I'd been tasered, I'd been shot in the head. These are stitches from a taser dart, a projectile fired at me by police officer Jeffrey Ray, right, at my home. So, um, so the pretext was that this guy was that I was in a fight with him threatening his life, all a lie, all fabrication. So he got an ex parte peace order. That again, that's been challenged. It's been demonstrated that it was a fabrication, right? It was a purge. It was actually perjured, and the state of Maryland also filed charges against him as well, Gamushumi and Jide Wariri. So in any event, all of that has been gone away, is gone away. So in the meantime, while this malicious prosecution was going on, I went to I went to consult a private attorney who did his investigation. Somebody referred me to him that, because he had an excellent profile because he was an ex Department of Justice prosecutor and he also had worked in the military. He was a military veteran and he'd worked in military intelligence. He'd worked in the intelligence community. So he had the means, to be able to represent me properly since as of the day I was assaulted, I was actually an auditor in the Department of the Navy holding a top secret SCI clearance. And I was supposed to be going through a new clearance that because I worked in a classified area. But, so I didn't know what was going on. And on that day, the pretext was I was supposed to be going through a Navy General Officer Professions program, right? With Lieutenant Devon Blake, who had created an appointment for me, and my, you know, that was what, I was led to uh, understand that I was going to be going through on that day. So when I was falsely imprisoned, and then the military force came, there was a drone hovering at my window, and there was, a helicopter, as my neighbor said. It came in full force, right? You think they came to pick up a terrorist? That was what terrified me on that day. That what's going on? They'd evacuated my building. I was alone. All my electronic devices had been hacked. My phone, my 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 computer. I still have my computer evidence, because the computer has an electronic, a permanent digital footprint that you can audit, that you can see. So I have all of that. I didn't imagine it. I have all of that evidence right there. That, okay, my computer was hacked. Everything, right? My phone was stolen, right? And money was removed from my account. So if it was foreign people who did it, that's a crime. The government would have been investigating it. But it turns out, it wasn't foreign invaders, it wasn't foreign bad actors or foreign malign actors that did it. So somebody referred me to this attorney, and after a while, he got back to me after he did his investigation, because it was the police brutality thing that I was interested in, for him to represent me. And then he said, "Okay, you know what?" He said some things to me. He said, first, um, the case against me, and the what the state attorney filed is actually a malicious prosecution, because um, there's an agreement between, with this federal government, that you can't file any case against the police while they have uh, a criminal case pending, involved with the same officers, the same incidents. So you have to wait for the criminal case to be over first of all, right? So that was the first thing he told me, right? So it's sort of like a case of, if you're just standing, right, as an innocent bystander, not committing any crime, and the police shoots you, right? Obviously, the police is going to be prosecuted. You file a lawsuit, a civil suit as well against the police, right? But if the police shot you while you're in the process of robbing a bank, then you don't get a lawsuit. You end up going to jail. There's no lawsuit. You don't get in. Even if they cut off your leg, the police was doing a job. So that's sort of the malicious prosecution that the police have done. That they fabricated stuff, and we have to wait for this criminal case that has gone on for almost 3 years now. So they filed false charges. But he brought up something else that I was surprised to learn about in his investigations. Right? He said he told me that, look, your the this case that I have, the criminal uh, case in Montgomery County, Maryland, state of Maryland, against me, that an EEOC complaint that I had regarding my job, and the Department of Defense Inspector General complaint I had, was central to this criminal case. I didn't see the link, because that's illegal. I have a JD myself, right? I have my JD, a law degree myself, and I thought, look, from George Washington University Law School, right? So um, that would be a violation of Whistleblower Act, right? If the government, the federal government, instigates a criminal case against me, that's retaliation, right? That violates, federal government, laws of the federal government, right, and our constitution. But I'm learning the government does things that are unconstitutional anyway. So, working in government, I got to learn that. So he told me that, which surprised me. I have no way to prove that, unless they do an investigation. And that's what Judge James Bonifant of Montgomery County has done. He's prevented any investigation. And my attorney, who should do an investigation, because I'm using a public defender, she's not done any investigation. They didn't do any investigation, all of them. They've suppressed any attempt at investigation. And the judge barred me from investigating, because he barred me from going back to my apartment that was in my name, where my property was. He barred me from going back there. He created a lie. He fabricated information in court. He lied. He said that, well, my neighbors don't want me to live there. They say, that they said you're not a good person. He defamed me. That's not true. He keeps bringing up this information, and without giving me a right to my opportunity, exercising my right to respond, to dispute it. So I haven't had my Sixth Amendment rights have been violated by Judge James Bonifant. Remember, part of natural justice, your right to be heard, but that's part of natural justice. The principle in Latin, again, it's audi alteram partem, right? The right to be heard. But this judge has blocked, any opportunity for me to dispute the false accusations, right, and to defend myself. The trial is supposed to be in two days' time, right? But let's see, he's done every machination, every scheme. He will postpone, cancel, done everything, right? And I'm seeing the arbitrary powers of Judge James Bonifant of Montgomery County and his abuse of office and, his unethical conduct, the procedural unfairness that he's been perpetrating against me, violating my constitutional rights and my due process rights. So in any event, so this attorney tells me that, and then he tells me something else funny. He asks me, he goes, why would the US government file a FISA against you? He just asked me that. I didn't know, you know, I said, he said, the FISA is Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. So it's something that the US God has. It's sort of like extraordinary because, Americans, we have protections, right? The government cannot surveil us. We have Fourth Amendment protections. But if you're a foreign terrorist, so FISA is used for foreign spies, you're a foreign agent or foreign government or terrorist, foreign, but you've got to be terrorist. So you don't use FISAs for American citizens, unless it's incidental, maybe a foreign agent, foreign spy that they're watching, monitoring, contacts you, an American citizen. So just incidental communication, right? So he asked me that, why would the US government file a FISA against you? I didn't even know there was a FISA one against me. I'm an American citizen, one. I work for the U.S. government, so I was thinking, is it because of the ostensive, the claimed, uh, you know, new clearance they claimed to be getting from me because I was working in the Navy? I couldn't figure, what he was talking about. Then he asked me questions, and in the end, I ended up revealing to him that, well, because I was like, is it because I filed complaints, EEOC complaints, that's equal employment complaint, that's a discrimination complaint that you're entitled to file as a federal government employee because you're free from discrimination. So he said, no, the U.S. government wouldn't do that because people file EEOC complaints all the time in the federal government. That's your right to petition, a constitutional right. And he asked me, who did I file the EEOC against? He ended up finding out that there were 4 senior executives in the Department of Defense that I filed a complaint against. 4. He said, hey, that's why they did it. That's why they filed the FISA. He said they're not supposed to do it, but it's sort of like a retaliatory thing they do in the federal government anyway. It instigates that triggers a FISA. They'll say, okay, they're a foreign threat, and that was basically what they did. So in all this while, they've been saying I'm a threat, I'm a danger, but I assumed it was because Jide Iwari had lied. So that's just kept going on that I was a threat. I mean, after the assault, one other thing that I ended up finding out, the charge statements made this false assertion that I'd been fired. I hadn't been fired. It was illegal, right? Because the head of the agency I was working for, as of the day of the swatting, was actually the Auditor General of the Navy, and she was protecting me, that nobody's going to fire you. And before they fire you, because I was a career employee, you have to give me notice. You have to, you have 30 days to respond. So there's time, so there was this false letter that he sent without notice. He just did it promptly on this day, May 4th. He did it. And so immediately I asked the Auditor General, who was my mentor. They didn't know if she was my mentor. And she said no, because she was head of the agency I worked for. She said no, she didn't know of it. So she has to authorize it. She already told me she has to authorize everything because she said she didn't trust the senior leaders, right? So it was unauthorized. Then I asked the person I was supposed to, security people I'm supposed to report to, they said they haven't, that it's illegal. Nobody's heard of it. Several days, they said it was illegal. They said no, not even illegal. They said it didn't exist. So maybe they were gaslighting, but they said no, they've not heard of anything. I'm active. They don't see anything wrong, blah blah blah. So they said, "There's no, you're not terminated. We haven't heard anything. You're the only one we've heard this from." So they're gaslighting me, right? I don't know, but anyway, it will be illegal, right, to terminate me, right, without giving me notice and giving me a chance to respond. And there was nothing in any event. So eventually, after all this, after I was raided and all of that, I eventually saw the fabricated termination letter. By the way, the person who wrote it was under investigation, and he was actually terminated from that agency that I was working in. He was under investigation for fraud and an offense against the United States. But he'd been there for a long time. He was a director, right? And I'd actually reported him for misconduct, illegal activities, and he didn't know I was reporting him. So it will be illegal. That would be retaliation. It would be absolutely illegal. Somebody I reported who was under investigation, who I was actually monitoring and sending, providing information against, it would be illegal for him to terminate me. Everything will be, in the federal government, you can't do that. If you have a private business, you can do whatever you want. In the federal government, unethical conduct is a no-no. But I'm seeing that, well, they do it anyway. So in any event, by the time I eventually got to see this fake termination letter, whatever. Okay, it's because it came from an official. It's real, but it's unauthorized or whatever. It's real, but it's illegal because it violates my rights. You can do a termination. You can only be terminated for cause. So it actually gives me cause. There's a cause of action I now have against the Department of the Navy because he represents the Navy. There's a legal cause of action I have against them. So. And in all of that, it turned out I hadn't even been terminated, right? It's just that the case, unlawful case against me in Montgomery County now prevented me from my job. By the way, I had actually been given a new offer. The Auditor General, different agencies, within the government, federal government, gave me, even within the Navy, I had new positions that were better, that I was going to. And obviously I can't do two jobs at the same time. So the fake termination letter I did, it was redundant, it was useless. But the thing is, that termination letter wrote something. The guy fabricated something. So we work in what's called a skiff. He fabricated information, and that could have triggered some kind of investigation or threat that okay, someone's trying to sell intelligence or whatever. So this guy lied that I abused a skiff. Skiff, that's where there's classified information, secret information, and it was a fabrication, all a complete lie, right? So that could have triggered something the way they came that, okay, there's a spy trying to steal information, sell information, because these are things you're not meant to take out. He lied. I saw it in there. So he wrote all these fabrications and it was long. And it turned out that this guy had been planning it for the past 6 months, but he was ordered to do so by some executives. So again, there were 4 executives that I'd reported. So that was actually misconduct in the federal government. They did something that was illegal. It's actually criminal. And so they used a FISA. So I'm an American citizen. I'm not a foreign spy. I don't represent a foreign agent. I'm not a terrorist. I've never been a terrorist. I'm not a threat. Even because I'm an American citizen, if I were a threat, it's the FBI, right? We have the police force, local, whatever that would apprehend me. So that's why they probably they had that fake FISA, which was illegal, and then they now used the local police. That's why the local police they were misled, misformed. So the Navy misled them. So this guy let me know for the first time. I'd never heard that. Wow, I was under that they did a FISA against me, which was illegal. So he said, when this is over, he's going to file a lawsuit against the United States military. It was illegal. That was the first thing he said. So I was like thinking, it's not the U.S. military that assaulted me. It was the police. Why are you filing something? He now explained everything. let me know that, okay, that it was the military that they set all of that up instead of the police to do what they did to me. Was because of the military. So that was action. So both of them, they worked together, and that's illegal. So they committed a criminal action, right, under color of law, and they used the United States government's name. And let me mention the people who did this violation. She was Undersecretary of Defense at the time. One of the four people that were in my complaints. That's my right to petition, right? And you defend yourself, right? You prove if I'm right or I'm wrong. That's my right. Honorable Catherine Miller, she was the Undersecretary of Defense in the Office of the Comptroller at the time. Um, uh, Kirsten Riesbeck, she was a senior executive. Kirsten Riesbeck, she had fabricated stuff. I'm going to get into all of that later on. Kirsten Riesbeck, and there's Jose Conejo, and a Laura Devlin Dominguez. I didn't know Jose Conejo, Laura Devlin Dominguez, but they worked together and discriminated against me, violated my rights. So let me get into how I got to get into the United States military. I got in through a John S. McCain Strategic Defense Fellowship, and it was the John S. McCain Strategic Defense Fellowship is a it's a 1 year, that's 12-month leadership development program for recent graduates of for recent advanced degree graduates, right? And it's to create future leaders, senior leaders of the U.S. Department of Defense. Um, Part of the program requirements is that a senior executive, member of the senior executive service, mentors you. So again, I've talked about what a member of the senior executive service is. They call them SES, the equivalent of generals, right? The equivalent of generals, flag officers, the civilians in the Department of Defense, in the U.S. federal government, because you can have them in other agencies as well. But other agencies have they make, but in the general federal civil service, the highest people, the executives, the leaders of the U.S. federal civil service are members of the senior executive service, the equivalent of generals. Um, yeah. So they could, for instance, an under secretary of defense or deputy, they're equivalent, they're senior executives, members. So like even a cabinet secretary is sort of like the highest level that you can be. Of course, that's a political appointee, but the senior executives, member of the senior executive service, they are not. Some of them, just a little percentage of them can be political appointees. For instance, if they appoint uh, an undersecretary of defense, that's a political appointee, right? But they're normally from members of they might not be, but it's preferable that they're members of they're career members of the civil service. Because the president can appoint some people like an assistant secretary of the Navy. That's a member of the senior executive service, but the president appointed that person. So the John S. McCain Strategic Defense Fellowship, the career path is to make them uh, members of the senior executive service, right? Or at least the GS-15. GS-15 is the highest GS scale, right? And so this guy I was talking about was a GS-15, but like the Auditor General of the Navy is an SCS, a member of the senior executive service and things like that. So the John S. McCain Strategic Defense Fellow was a great program, a great way to be able to, it's the most prestigious program in the Department of Defense to for civilians to, because they're not starting from bottom like people normally do at the civil service. They're just taking you through a program directly and launching you to become a member of, to get into the senior executive service track based on your performance. Of course, that means It's rigorous. It's very highly selective. It's like the most competitive people that get in there. They typically go to, in the cohort I was in, you see, they typically go to the most elite schools in America, the Ivy Leagues, MIT, very prestigious schools. And so you see people with PhDs, JDs, even medical doctors participate in the program because, it's a senior leadership track. So I was selected for this, and it's a rigorous program to get into it, because I had to wait for the clearance. I didn't know anything about working in the Department of Defense in the U.S. federal government. But here I was, I'd been selected for it, and I had to wait through for the clearance. I was, I was a top secret SCI clearance, so all the way to to the top. And I was working directly. So you got a special assistant level. So you're a special assistant. Again, it was created by National Defense Authorization Act of 2019 and 2024. They applied to it as of my time. So 2019. So I want to be keeping these videos short. So I'm going to do a subsequent video, and I'll talk about my experience as a John S. McCain Strategic Defense Fellow, and my experience in the, how the events that occurred that eventually led to this this bizarre malicious prosecution and defamation against me. So it's interesting that at least some of the people in my discrimination complaint and my DOD Inspector General complaints, because I filed complaints regarding fraud, that some people, senior leaders, were committing fraud. And then they first do a soft investigation, and then they do an official investigation, inquiry. That okay, there's probable cause to dig into this deep. Um, at least 12 of them are from Montgomery County, very county. They're from Rockville. So it's a close community. Many people there, they've known each other. So Judge James Bonifant may have personal ties, personal relationship to these people I filed a complaint against, because they committed fraud, and they also now, not just fraud, they committed uh, perjury, right? Perjury, retaliation, and they abused office to try and now defame me, to violate my constitutional rights. And so it's gotten into the actions instigated the hoax and the swatting, and that's the injuries I suffered in attempted murder. And of course, that's also part of it's a hate crime, because it was a discrimination complaint I had filed. I'd made a complaint that, okay, it appears this person was racist. These people were racist. By the way, the John S. McCain Strategic Defense Fellowship was not a diversity program. It was a program for the most competitive people, right? If you look at the current cohort, they're all white people, right? They're all white. Not a single Asian, not a single black person. They're all white. The current cohort of the John S. McCain Strategic Defense Fellow program. Not that they're the most competitive. So it's turning out to be bizarre. I mean, I was the first person to be. Anyway, I'll get into it later on. But in my cohorts, and you can see why I'm always like, man, I love America, because until all of this right happening, my life had just been, I lived a charmed life, right? It was just like a dream, a charmed life. I was a number one pick in my cohort, right? And I'm black. Again, I was the only black person. Well, again, the only black guy. There was another in my cohort. There was a black guy who he appears to be half white. In fact, he's half white, half black, right? I don't know what he identifies, but it was just, we had only two black men, and I'm the first African, right? First African guy to have this program. It's a very prestigious program in the Department of Defense in the U.S. federal government. You can check it out, John S. McCain Strategic Defense Fellow. So I felt very honored to have been selected in the program. It was just right after I finished school. It was during COVID. And that was what I was planning, because I'd actually started a business with my friend in Nigeria. I was planning to go back and, focus on what I had started, my business. But then this came along, and so I got into it, and I had to separate from what I was doing back home. I'll do another video and I'll continue with my experience as a John S. McCain Strategic Defense Fellow in the U.S. Department of Defense. Thank you.